For decades, one roofing material was everywhere. It didn't rot. It didn't burn. It laughed at rainstorms and outlasted every other roof on the block. Builders loved it. Homeowners loved it. It got slapped on schools, hospitals, and millions of houses all over the world. But in one small town in Pennsylvania, that same miracle material was quietly doing something else. Something nobody could see. Something that wouldn't show up for 20, 30, even 40 years. Kids in this town used to play on massive white hills right outside their houses. They'd throw pieces of it at each other like snowballs. Parents let them. Nobody thought twice. Those hills were made of the exact same stuff sitting on top of their roofs. Today, that town is still dealing with the damage. Grandfathers and fathers from the same family, gone from the same disease. And it all traces back to a roofing material that seemed, for 100 years, like one of the smartest inventions humanity ever made. This is the story of how that happened, and why it took so painfully long for anyone to stop it. Let's rewind to the late 1800s, to a small town outside Philadelphia that most people had never heard of, a place called Ambler. In 1881, a businessman named Richard Madison moved his company there, drawn in by the railroads and water supply running through town. He'd stumbled onto a mineral with almost unbelievable properties. It didn't burn, it didn't corrode, and it could be woven into fabric or mixed into cement like it was just another building material. That mineral was asbestos. By 1896, Madison's company, known as Keesby and Madison, had built the nation's first asbestos textile plant, right there in Ambler. And from there, it exploded. The factory churned out roofing shingles, pipe insulation, fireproof curtains, brake linings. Practically anything that needed to survive heat or fire got a dose of asbestos. At its peak, this single plant was the largest asbestos factory in the entire world, employing thousands of workers and eventually stretching 4 football fields long. For Ambler, this was a golden age. The company didn't just employ the town, it practically was the town. It built homes for workers. It funded local businesses and community buildings. Kids grew up watching the same factory whistle blow every morning at 8, sending one shift in and another shift out, like clockwork, for generations. But every day, that factory was also producing something else. Mountains of leftover asbestos waste. Literal mountains, some towering up to 100 feet high, piled up in plain sight around town. Locals nicknamed them the White Mountains of Ambler. And here's the part that's hard to hear. Nobody treated those piles like a hazard. Kids ran along walkways built right into them. They'd have mock snowball fights, throwing chunks of leftover asbestos shingle at each other. Wind would carry fine white dust off the piles and straight into nearby yards and homes, settling onto porches, gardens, and laundry lines like it was nothing more than dust. Nobody was trying to hurt anyone. Asbestos felt less like a danger and more like a miracle. A material so useful, so fireproof, so modern, that almost no one stopped to ask what it might be doing to the lungs of the people breathing it in every single day. That question wouldn't get answered for decades. And by the time it was, the damage had already settled deep into an entire town. One rooftop, one wind gust, one playground at a time. Here's the cruel twist to this story. The danger of asbestos wasn't some undiscovered secret. Doctors had actually started noticing asbestos-related deaths as early as the early 1900s. While Ambler's factory was still booming, still hiring workers, still shipping shingles out to build roofs across the country. But knowing something and acting on it turned out to be two very different things. For decades, the company that ran the Ambler plant changed hands, bought and sold, again and again, passed from one corporation to the next. Each new owner inherited the same factory, the same white mountains, and, quietly, the same risk. Production kept going. The dust kept blowing into backyards. Kids kept playing on the piles. And then, slowly, the town started noticing something wrong. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't one dramatic moment. Asbestos-related diseases don't work that way. They can take 20, 30, even 40 years to show up after someone breathes the fibers in. So the people getting sick in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s weren't newly exposed. They were paying, decades later, for dust they'd breathed in as kids, running along those white hills without a second thought. One Ambler resident, now in her 60s, lost both her father and her grandfather to mesothelioma, a rare, aggressive cancer almost exclusively caused by asbestos exposure. And she wasn't the only one. Family after family in this small town could trace the exact same disease back through generations, back to the exact same source, the factory that had once been the pride of their hometown. By the time the plant finally shut its doors in the 1980s, it left behind more than just empty buildings. It left behind mountains, literally, of contaminated waste, sitting in the middle of a residential town, still capable of releasing dangerous fibers into the air if disturbed. This is where the story reaches its breaking point. The federal government eventually stepped in, and Ambler officially became the site of not one, but two separate EPA Superfund sites, a designation reserved for some of the most contaminated, dangerous land in the entire country. Crews spent years covering the old waste piles with layers of soil and fabric, trying to seal in decades of poison so it couldn't blow into the air again. But here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. Capping the waste doesn't erase it. It's still there, right now, buried under grass and trees in a town where people live, walk their dogs, and send their kids to school. And in 2005, more than a century after Madison first built his factory, a developer proposed building a brand new 17-story apartment tower right on top of some of that old asbestos land. Residents were horrified. They fought back, formed protest groups, and forced the plan to be dropped, dragging the EPA back in for a fresh investigation of ground that, on paper, was supposed to have already been cleaned up. So here's the question this whole story leaves hanging in the air. If a miracle material from over 100 years ago can still be shaping and threatening a town today, what else are we building our lives on top of right now, without knowing it yet? Asbestos didn't disappear because someone finally proved it was dangerous. It disappeared because families like the ones in Ambler refused to stay quiet about what it had already taken from them. The roofs are gone now. The factory is gone too. But the ground still remembers. If this story stuck with you, hit like and subscribe, because it turns out some of the most dangerous stories in history are the ones hiding in plain sight, right under a coat of paint or a bag of shingles. There's more of them coming.